Time now for Grillin Ken. This is the segment of the show in which I answer your questions. Let's go to the first one this week, and it comes from Luis Frias. Do you think that Bob Melvin will be back with the Pods next year, knowing that the relationship with Preller is unfixable? That line, unfixable, that word, is directly from our story in The Athletic last week that detailed the Padres' dysfunction, what one player called an institutional failure. And in that story, which I co wrote with Dennis Lynn, we detailed the rift between general manager A.J. Preller and manager Bob Melvin. Now, where this goes is unclear. The Padres CEO Eric Grupner went on the radio in San Diego after the story came out and said when a team falls short, everything gets laid bare. And what he meant by that was everything has to be looked at, everything has to be assessed and analyzed going forward. So the Padres are going to take a look at where they are as an organization. They're going to assess A.J. Preller and Bob Melvin and make a determination at that point which one of them stays, which one of them goes, if that's how they want to do it. Maybe both stay. It's hard to imagine that happening. What I can imagine happening is at least one of them not being back with the team next year. We'll just have to see how it all plays out. Good question here, Michael. Can you explain the typical motivation behind a mutual option? Team wants a club option, players want a player option. A mutual option seems like a compromise that neither side is happy about. Michael, again, great question. And you often see these mutual options, and you might wonder as a fan, why do they even include these? They're almost never exercised. If the player has a great year, the club exercises the mutual option. The player says, no, I'm going to become a free agent. If the player has a down year, the player says, yeah, I'll exercise the mutual option. I want to be back at this number. And the club says, no, you can become a free agent. We don't need you. So they're almost never exercised. And I went back in time to a story on ESPN.com by Sam Miller in 2017, which did a great job detailing the motivations for mutual options. And the biggest one usually is to simply defer money into next year, to attach a buyout to that mutual option to be paid later. The buyout doesn't come right away, it can be paid at a later date. Other parts of this include creating a connection with the player that gives you groundwork for a future negotiation. That's a motivation too. And finally, Sam wrote this, it makes a player feel better. It gives him some idea that the team does have interest in him beyond this year. And it can be viewed in that sense as a win-win, though it almost never turns out that way. So those are the mutual options. We'll be hearing a lot about them this offseason again, as we always do, but don't take them too seriously. All right, the final question this week comes from Riley. And Riley asks, hi, Ken. If you were trapped on a deserted island for a year and could bring 3 books with you, what would they be? Well, if I was trapped on a deserted island for a year, hopefully I'd be able to read more than 3 books, but here are the top 3 that I came up with. The first, Lonesome Dove. Larry McMurtry, a classic, a Pulitzer Prize winner for fiction. Lonesome Dove is 843 pages about a cattle drive, and you can't put it down. It's one of my favorite books of all time. Of course, it became a movie and television series, whatever, after that, but the book is where it's at. Second book, an author who I met over the years, one of the most brilliant journalists and authors of our recent times, Richard Ben Kramer. Now, Richard Ben Kramer wrote a biography of Joe DiMaggio. He's written a couple of other sports-related things as well in his career, but the book I love from him most, What It Takes. What It Takes is a story of the 1988 presidential election. It's a journalistically written story. What I mean is it's involving a lot of reporting, behind the scenes stuff, just telling what's going on with all of the different candidates. It was Dukakis, it was George Bush, there's Gary Hart, there were a number of candidates in it. Joe Biden is in there as well. There is no political bent to this book, okay? So don't even go there with me. But it's a fascinating story of a presidential campaign, which is actually something I've always sort of wanted to cover because a presidential campaign has some similarities to a baseball season. There's an ebb and flow. It has a definitive time frame. It's just kind of interesting to me. All right, final book. Yes, I'm going to go with a baseball book here. Lords of the Realm is one of my all-time favorite books, but I'm going to pick Moneyball. And you might say, Moneyball, come on, it was not that good. It was just really about the Oakland A's, and it left out some things. It didn't focus enough on Hudson and Zito. And yeah, I know all the criticism. But if you read that book by Michael Lewis, one of the brilliant authors ever, Michael Lewis not only tells the story of Billy Beane in this book, which is a great story in itself, but he does it in an entertaining way that few writers anywhere can capture. It's just a great read, and I frequently go back to Moneyball as a reference point for some stories. I do that, but I also just read it for the writing because I love the writing in that book. And yes, it became a movie with Brad Pitt, but the book is where it's at. And yes, you can complain about Moneyball, you can complain about analytics, complain about anything you want. I'm just talking about the quality of the writing, the quality of the book. It is a great book.